my name's Michelle, and I'm going to do the business ethics of sexual harassment. Human assessments of what is right and what is wrong change over time, and these changes are sparked by evolution within our culture, and the changes contribute to further advancement and more adjustments in the ways that we measure certain ethical views. So one area that has seen ethical evolution is sexual ethics, which are the ethics that concern issues from all aspects of human sexuality, including human sexual behavior. The EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, states that it is unlawful to harass a person because of that person's sex. Harassment can include sexual harassment or unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of sexual nature. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing and offhand comments or isolated incidents, harassment is illegal when it is frequent and severe, that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as demotion or the victim being fired or quitting. Sexual harassment is an ethical issue primarily because it harms others. The fact that harassment has also become a legal issue simply confirms its ethical foundation. There are a variety of instances of social sexual conduct at work that can be perceived as unethical. An example of that would be a supervisor that's being adulterous and is in a romantic relationship with a subordinate, and the romantic relationship is motivated by the subordinate's desire for career advancement and the supervisor's desire for sexual gratification. That's an unethical situation. Additionally, because sexually harassing behavior has the potential risk to the target's physical and psychological well-being, it too may be perceived as unethical. The bottom line in either scenario is that an employee's participation either in a workplace romance or sexually harassing behavior can constitute unethical behavior at work. There are two types of sexual harassment. Quid pro quo is when a person makes an employee's status depend on the victim providing sexual favors. This is less common. And then a hostile work environment is when unwanted, frequent sexual conduct causes an uncomfortable environment. This constitutes for up to 95% of sexual harassment cases. Sexual and gender-based harassment. This is a form of discrimination which can include gender-related comments about a person's physical characteristics, suggestive or offensive remarks or innuendos, propositions of physical intimacy, threats or taunting, and demands for dates and sexual favors. Workplace romance and the role of morale. Workplace romances cross the boundaries of office protocol and have been subjected to ethical scrutiny. Sexual harassment is a problem for many organizations. A company or an employer faces substantial financial loss from the victim being harassed. When a person is being sexually harassed, they tend to feel uncomfortable being at work. They use their sick days. There's a loss of productivity, and they might quit. Organizations need to understand that sexual harassment lies within a broader context of sex discrimination and inequality of opportunity in the workplace. It's both illegal and unethical. Sexual harassment presents morale issues for companies in the area of organizational relationships. Organizational relationships are defined as the behavior of organization members towards customers, suppliers, subordinates, superiors, peers, and others. So these are all relationships in which sexual harassment can occur. A successful company requires good relationships with its employees and the people with whom they do business for. So sexual harassment can create poor working relationships, which can harm the company, the individuals directly involved, and the individuals indirectly involved. Companies with high incidence of sexual harassment often have additional problems within their organizational relationships. And as previously noted, sexual harassment is considered to be a form of discrimination. And more importantly, that's unethical for one employee to use sexual blackmail against another for another employee to create a hostile working environment. How often does this occur? It's hard to tell because only 5 to 15% of victims come forward to report the incidents of sexual harassment at work, but it's estimated that almost half of all women have experienced sexual harassment in at least one of its forms in their workplace, and 15% of men will be sexually harassed at some point during their careers. 75% of women experience sexual harassment in the forms of jokes or teasing and said that has happened more than once, and 54% of women are pressured for sexual behaviors and said that that has happened more than once. Cognitive psychology studies the way in which humans process information. It studies the internal process along with the attention and thinking. The subject of sexual harassment bears the problem of its perceptual nature, where men and women differ in what they perceive as sexual harassment. There is a lack of consensus as to what can constitute a sexual harassment, and it's particularly the case when examining the behaviors and circumstances in which sexual harassment is believed to occur. A utilitarian approach to the subject: do the greatest good for the greatest number. The utilitarian point of view allows us to consider the immediate and less immediate consequences of our actions and look to beyond self-interests and to consider the impartial interests of all people affected by one's actions. This point of view offers a simple way of deciding the morality and the right course of action to take. In this case, refraining from carrying out a sexually harassing act towards an individual will simply have better results for the team than it would doing so. I put a question at the bottom of this slide for you to think about. What happens in the long run if the company does not take action against sexual harassment? And do you think a company would benefit at all if it does not act on sexual harassment? Deontology is derived from the Greek meaning, the study of duty, and is an effective way to determine the morality of a particular subject. The rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, is a basic fundamental in business ethics, which can be easily applied to sexually harassment. If it is right to treat everyone as you would want to be treated, it is obviously wrong to sexually harass anybody because nobody wants to be harassed. The duty of non-malefice is the idea that it is a duty to avoid harming other people. This idea can also be applied to sexual harassment because sexual harassment can not only hurt the person being harassed, but the company as well. Confucianism emphasizes treating others with respect. It also recognizes status and power differences. To the Confucianist, it is clearly unethical behavior because it injects power into a relationship that is based on function, so this makes it exploitation. Moral principles: what is right and what is wrong, or what is good and what is bad, are basic questions in ethical situations. The choices that individuals make about how to respond to life events are informed and directed by their ethics. Individuals who endorse relativism operate from an ideology related to ethical skepticism, which means they have a skeptical point of view and that there might be different ways to look at morals. In this case situation, they argue each situation must be examined individually, where individuals who endorse idealism reject the use of a situation's unique circumstances on a basis for moral evaluation, and instead they appeal to natural law or rationality to determine ethical judgments. Acts are judged as moral or immoral through their comparison with some universal moral rule. In applying these two ethical ideologies to situations involving sexual harassment, what might or might not be perceived as sexual harassment can vary. The relativist tends to focus on the context of the situation and examines each situation individually. He or she would see that a lot of verbal and nonverbal messages have the potential to be interpreted as sexual harassment, but on the other side, they can also not be interpreted as sexual harassment. On the idealism side are individuals who instead appeal to natural law or rationality to determine ethical judgments. What that means. So applying these two ethical ideologies to a situation involving sexual harassment What might or might not be perceived as sexual harassment can vary. The relativist tends to focus on the contextual appropriateness and examines each situation individually. So people who subscribe to a relativist ideology would examine each incident of potentially being sexual or harassing behavior or potentially not being sexually harassing behavior. On the idealism side are individuals who instead appeal to natural law or rationality to determine ethical judgments. This leaves 4 types of people. People who subscribe to absolute ideology have no exceptions. They're high in idealism and low in relativism. They assume that the best possible outcome can always be achieved by following universal morale. Situationists are high in idealism and high in relativism. They reject moral rules and advocate for an individualistic analysis of each act in each situation, because behaviors change in different scenarios and situations, and so they focus on the situation and the environmental factors that might have influenced the behavior. Exceptionists are low in idealism and low in relativism. They use moral absolutes to guide judgments, but they are open to exceptions to these standards. Subjectivists are low in idealism and high in relativism. They make moral appraisals based on personal values and perspective. I've included a quiz so you can quiz yourself to see if you endorse more relativism ideology or idealism ideology. And then when responding to social sexual behavior at work, do you think that some may rely more on their own ethical standards and internal norms than on current legal standards and external norms? Lastly, how to prevent sexual harassment. Creating an accessible, clear sexual harassment policy is something all organizations should do. Other proven techniques to deter sexual harassment are to provide several different ways of filing complaints. For example, companies can have a calling hotline, and you can contact the Human Resource Department, or by contacting their supervisor would be simple, effective ways to report harassment. It's also easier for employees if they have an option of speaking to a male or female company representative. One of the most effective ways of preventing harassment is conducting sexual harassment training. Training can consist of watching a video, a qualified public speaker, or even reading material. Finally, yearly meetings should be conducted with supervisors to review the harassment policy.